one of the things that we use in CSE that we don't use as heavily anywhere else is models. So we call them models of CSE. Now, I will be absolutely 100% honest. When I came into this field, having always been in sexual violence and in the criminal justice system, I remember thinking, I don't know anything about these models. I've never seen them written in literature. I don't know any theory about them. I better start learning. So I remember thinking, I'm going to read everything. I'm going to read all of the reports that they came from. I'm going to read all of the academic literature that they come from. And then when I read about how they work, I realised that there were some people putting out 4 models, some people putting out 3 models, some people putting out 7 models, some people putting out 5 models. And I feel like I did my best to try and understand. But actually, after 2 or 3 years of this field, I've now got to the point where I've lost the will to live with it. Not only that, but having now being 2 years into a PhD in sexual violence and now also doing pieces of work, like commissioned pieces of work on sexual offending and sexual offender treatment programmes and looking at intervention effectiveness, I've come to realise that those models don't mean anything. And I know that sounds really strong, but how, as a field in CSE, have we managed to ignore the fact that sexual violence as a topic of research existed before CSE? We've developed models that have no bearing on sex offender typologies, on sex offender methods, on any sex offender research, to be honest. They were just observed patterns. And now what you've got is professionals trying to fit like a square peg into a round hole. And they're sort of saying to me, well, it could be the boyfriend model, which, by the way, is the worst heteronormative term. But it could be the boyfriend model because, she met a boy, but then this happened and he introduced her to her mates, and then she was trafficked, and then this happened. So I think it was that model, and then it moved to that model, but it could be that model, but she's still with the original guy, so I think it's still the boyfriend model. If a concept fits into loads of different models at once, it isn't a concept. It can't be. It can't be 3 things at once, because you're saying that they are models. And even when we draw them in Venn diagrams that overlap, so we're saying actually these things overlap, and in the middle they overlap like that, and actually you could have a child where it looks like all these different models. It's probably because the models aren't that great. For example, inappropriate relationship model is, say for example, teacher exploits a child that they've taught. So that would therefore be an inappropriate relationship model. However, what about, for example, a case that I knew of from about a year ago or so, where it was a private school, all of the teachers are perpetrators. All of the teachers they've slowly pushed out safe teachers and safe staff members until they're all perpetrators. And then they all were sexually abusing children. After a period of time, realised they could make money from this, and then started to bring other perpetrators into the school of evenings or certain weekends where they would get the children in, and were sexually exploiting them and actually selling them. Right, what model's that? Because you've got inappropriate relationship model, then you could argue it fits under organised crime, because that is organised crime, let's be fair. Then you could argue it fits under a network model, which at the moment fits under organised crime, but it's classed as less organised. The children are going to think they're in a relationship with the teacher, which we know is fairly common in that type of method, where the teacher, convinces them that they're special, and it's a one-on-one relationship and stuff like that. So the child's perspective is going to be that it's a relationship model or boyfriend model. From our point of view, we're going to think it's a completely different model. What about then if they're taking pictures of the children and putting them up on the internet and on the darknet, and are making profit from that? Then we've got even further into organised crime, but the children still see it as boyfriend model. It doesn't make any sense, and it's getting... At the time when it was just like theoretical models, and I used to argue these are just theoretical, do not base your decisions on this, when I was teaching professionals, I have now seen at least 4 CSE toolkits in the UK being used actively by local authorities, where they are asking the professional which model. is this child being sexually exploited in, and then the model then means which risk level they'll go at. So say, for example, if it was organised crime, that'd go to high, and so on. So now we are basing actual decisions and risk levels of children on models that have never been tested, that don't mean anything. We're ignoring decades of excellent research and proof and evidence around sex offender typologies, around sex offender methods, around, say, for example, serial rapist research. We're ignoring things like that. We've watered down the language, so we call them all perpetrators instead of calling them rapists and calling them child abusers. So we could actually take a lot from previous research, and we're not doing that, and I don't know why. So I've recently said that I'm going to stop teaching CSE models because I feel that they are obsolete. And that I will talk about them and I will say this is what is being used. However, this is what I think is happening, and I want you to use your common sense, and I want you to focus on the child. Stop trying to categorise these things, because actually I don't know what you get from the categorisation of the models other than saying to professionals these are the potential ways that this could happen, but that's pretty much it. I'm not sure what else you would get from that. And that sort of quite neatly fits into the issues that we've got around ignoring brilliant minds like Finkelhor, where we know that over and over again, decades and decades and decades of research and testing and evidence have shown around, preconditions model, and around grooming, and around, sex offender methods, and all sorts of different things that we know about. And yet here we are in CSE using the grooming line, which is the most oversimplified resource I have ever seen. It completely ignores how nuanced grooming can be. It also ignores the fact that there's quite a lot of sexual assaults and sexual exploitation that happen without a befriending stage and without a relationship stage. Especially online, actually. There are amazing pieces of research happening in the field of psychology, forensic psychology, criminology, that are looking at the different grooming methodologies of perpetrators that are online offenders versus contact offenders, and then also the group of offenders that sit in both of those things at once. So contact offenders that will use online to draw the child in, but prefer contact offences, versus offenders that have never actually met a human child. They've never sexually abused a human child, but they have abused and exploited them online, and they feel that that's distance. Now they use different methods. We're not utilising them in CSE, and I feel like there's a massive gap. So this is something that's really important to me, because in the age of, post-truth and fake news and, sort of ignoring facts, if we're going to get anywhere in CSE, we have got to start using the masses of research and people's brilliant work that has already occurred to inform our practice. Why are we reinventing the wheel? You wouldn't do that anywhere else. You wouldn't do that in any other field. If a PhD student or an academic decided to publish an article on something, and I review different articles, and recently I've reviewed one where the literature review completely missed out an entire set of really important research that was key to one of their arguments, actually. And I thought, God, what a shame, because either they've not read it, or they've forgotten, or they're just not taking it into account. They've not seen the link. And I feel like we're doing that in CSE. We've either forgotten that there was actually a field before CSE, or we're ignoring it, or we've just decided that it's not relevant when it very clearly is, because what we're talking about is sex offenders. So yeah, models of CSE. I think if we're gonna move on anything, if we're gonna utilise money, we're gonna utilise time, I think that'd be brilliant place to start, especially if you're more interested in the sex offender side of it, which is quite important, because I'm getting more and more and more professionals talking to me now about the fact that we've become, careful the way I say this, but overly victim-centred, to the point where actually we are completely ignoring the variables that come from a perpetrator and the influences that come from the perpetrator, because I think we might have, possibly as a country, sort of gone, we don't know what to do with these sex offenders. We don't know how to tackle them. We also don't know how to prosecute or investigate them, and we don't know how to prevent this from happening. So what we'll do is we'll focus all of our resources on stopping children from being abused by actually changing something about the child and the child's environment and the child's family, and we'll just, I don't know what we're doing with perpetrators now. Like, we're not there's not a lot really, is there? The work that's being done around sexually harmful behaviours in children is good, but what really are we doing? You know, there's only a few dedicated organisations that are actually dedicated to working with sex offenders. Other than that, we are pretty much set on you know, trying to change children, trying to educate children, trying to change their behaviours, trying to change their vulnerabilities, trying to preempt it, trying to risk assess, all those different things. But actually, and I read a brilliant quote online. It's definitely not me, so don't cite me for this, but it was, I'm sure, was it on Tumblr? It might have been on Tumblr, and it said something like, when we get sexual violence victims or potential victims to change something about their behaviour so they don't get victimised, all we're really doing is making sure that somebody else gets victimised by that sex offender. That's all we've done. We've shifted the target from one person to another. We've not actually done anything about rape culture. We've not done anything about the sex offender. What we have done, and we might think that this is a victory, we've saved one person or one child, but the sex offender will just attack somebody else. So what have we really achieved there? That's what I feel like we're doing at the moment. So that's that for that section, and then the next video is the next section will just be to finish off and summarise.